Welcome everybody, my name is Tim Sandy. I'm a VMware Systems Engineer and I'm dedicated to tech data. In today's session we're going to talk about the newly released vSphere 6.0 and we're going to talk about what new features have been added as well as what features have been updated since the previous releases. So let's get started. Now first off, let's go ahead and talk about vSphere and vCenter 6 as far as what's been newly added to it, so anything that is new and was not in any of the previous releases of vSphere or vCenter. So we're going to talk about those first. So first off, I'd like to talk about cross vSwitch vMotion. Now cross vSwitch vMotion basically means that previously we were unable to do a vMotion of a VM between different types of switches. There are two different types. There's a standard switch and distributed switch. Now, before we were not able to do that. Now, as you can see here, we can go from a standard to standard virtual switch. We can go from a standard to a distributed switch, and then we can go from distributed to distributed. So now we can cross vMotion between those different types of virtual switches, and that's something we couldn't do before. So that's a huge leap forward. Another huge leap forward is that we can now do also vCenter to vCenter vMotion. Before, you could only vMotion within a cluster that was tied to a single vCenter. We could not go from two locations that had separate vCenter servers. We couldn't vMotion between those. Now we can do cross vMotion between vCenters. Now this is a huge leap forward. This opens up a lot of doors for us. And again, it gives you that ability to vMotion a machine from one vCenter to another, even though they are managed separately. And then you can now look at them as one big environment, even though there are two separate vCenters in there. So you can share those resources and you can look at those resources in both those locations as one big pool of resources. Now, in association with this, with those two capabilities, we also now have long distance vMotion. Before, we were limited on doing any type of long distance vMotion because there was a limitation as far as how many milliseconds round trip communication had to happen. Well, that's changed now. Before it was 5 milliseconds, now we're all the way up to 100 milliseconds as you see, which now allows us to actually do a vMotion across the country or even across continents for that matter. So this is a huge benefit and a huge feature advancement that a lot of people have been waiting for. So when you tie in the vMotion between virtual switches, between virtual centers, and now being able to do that over long distances, that's a big deal. So again, you can do permanent migrations. So if you have shift workers on two sides of the world, you can move your VMs from one place to another. So then that way, as they're on day shift, it can accommodate both those day shifts, even though they're 12 hours difference. You can also use it as disaster recovery. So there's a lot of use cases behind this. And I highly recommend that you look deeper into this and get some more information on all the advancements with the vSwitch, the vCenter, vMotion capabilities that have been added. Something new that's been also added that wasn't there before was this Platform Service Controller, or PSC. This is tying in our single sign-on or SSO function, as well as licensing, as well as certificate authority. So now what we've done is we've created this Platform Service Controller, and in it has all three of those services: the SSO, the licensing, and the certificate authority. Before, it was SSO was separately, licensing was within vCenter, and it just made it very cumbersome to try to manage all of these amongst different environments. So now with this one uniform controller, this can manage all three of these type of services for different environments, and it makes it easier for renewing and distributing certificates amongst your organization. It gives you that one single sign-on server for all your environments. Again, just making it much easier to manage, less time dedicated towards that. And ultimately, it's going to save you money. You've probably heard about virtual volumes, or vVols. vVols is now available within vSphere 6 now. And just simply put, virtual volumes is, we're talking about the connections from our vSphere host off to our NAS or storage devices. And the paths that you used to, and how you used to connect to your storage, there was a lot of work that had to be done from the storage admin side as well as the virtual admin side to present the storage to your hosts. Now with virtual volumes, again, much like we did with the compute, networking, and storage, by abstracting it, we're all now be able to present all these data stores virtually as a volume. And again, it just makes it very easy for both the virtual admin and the storage admin to be able to communicate and set up that communication between your host and your storage, where typically all your VMs are residing. So just simply put, again, it's making it easy and creating this virtual layer, much like we've done everything else. And it makes that connection to the storage easier. You can also do policies just like we can with everything else now. So again, making life much easier for your administrators, less time to be able to manage and to implement any type of storage connections. So again, just look into this a little bit deeper, but just to cover it real quickly, again, it just virtualizes your SAN and NAS devices. Another big one is now with vSphere 6, we now are able to work with these vGPU type graphics acceleration cards. You put them in your vSphere host, and then with your Horizon View desktop, you can point them to this acceleration card. And what this is doing for you is it's now giving Horizon View desktops the capability to run graphic intensive 3D type rendering applications, such as CAD applications, video games, as well as Google Earth, anything that's very graphic intensive, 3D modeling, anything to that nature now. Before was a little limiting on Horizon View desktops. So now with being able to add these vGPU cards, such as the NVIDIA K1 and K2 cards, as well as some new Intel cards you put into your host, you can basically dedicate your Horizon View desktops to access directly those graphics cards, and they will do all the graphic intensive processing rather than doing it against the server or against the virtual machines processor. So again, now you're giving the capability to run very high-end applications to your users that are running on virtual desktops, something that was not, we were not able to do that before. So this was also very anticipated and a huge leap forward that people were excited to hear about. Now let's talk about just the standard features that were already in vCenter that we just made some improvements and upgrades to. So fault tolerance. Although we've had fault tolerance in our previous revisions of vSphere, it was somewhat limiting. We were limited to only being able to protect a VM that had only one vCPU. Now, the problem with that is most critical business applications are typically requiring more than one vCPU. So now with vSphere 6, we can protect VMs with up to 4 vCPUs. Okay, so this makes it possible now to where your business critical applications, such as maybe an Exchange server, SQL database server, all those critical apps, now you can protect these with fault tolerance, which you couldn't before because it was limited to the one virtual CPU. Now there is some constraints behind how many fault tolerant machines you can do, depending on the number of vCPUs are on them and that you're protecting. So just be aware of that. But again, this is something that a lot of your partners are going to talk about. You're going to hear talk around this new fault tolerance in that it can now protect VMs with up to 4 virtual CPUs. So you definitely want to get a little more familiar with this one. Now, previously in version 5, we had 2 types of vCenter servers. You had the Windows-based Virtual Center server, and then you also had the VMware Appliance as well that you could install and deploy. Now, previously in versions 5.x, there was a difference between these two. The Windows-based Virtual Center was much more full-featured, didn't have the limitations, whereas the Appliance had some limitations that basically it just couldn't do all the same feature sets and to the amount that the Windows-based machine could. Now with vSphere 6 and vCenter 6, now we're happy to say that both the Windows-based and the Appliance, as you see here, are both the same as far as the features and functionalities, as well as the numbers as you see there as far as hosts per virtual center, number of hosts per cluster. Those are all the same now. So basically both of those are identical now. So now you're not having to suffer if you want to use the Appliance over the Windows-based virtual center. Now we also have the vCenter linked mode. This was also in previous versions of vSphere. Now with the linked mode, much like I was talking about with the Windows-based vCenter in comparison to the Appliance, there were some discrepancies on what you can do between the Appliance and the the Windows-based vCenter server. As you see here with linked mode, we have much more capabilities in vSphere 6. Now the appliance is capable of doing linked mode. This is something that you could only do with the Windows-based vCenter server previously. And as you see there, everything, single inventory view. Again, when you use this link mode with vCenter, you're connecting multiple vCenters together so that you get one pane of glass so that you can manage it as though you were looking at a single vCenter server. And then you can collectively manage that. So saving time, money, and effort for the virtual admins from a day-to-day management perspective. Now, vSphere Data Protection, there used to be two versions. There was vSphere Data Protection, and then there was an advanced version. The advanced was obviously more feature-rich than the just the regular data protection. Now with vSphere 6, what we've done is we've gotten rid of the VDP advanced version, and all the features of the advanced version we've now put into just a regular data protection. So now vSphere 6 comes with vSphere Data Protection, and that is available in the Essentials Plus or higher editions. It comes with it. There's no extra costs. So now, like I said, as long as you are purchasing Essentials Plus or higher, you will get the VDP capability and with no extra cost, and you'll get the full features of the previous Data Protection Advanced. The vSphere Replication Appliance, this has been upgraded as well. Now, if you're not familiar with it, the vSphere Replication Appliance is used specifically with our vCloud Air DR as a service offering. So that is our DR cloud-based offering, so that you can replicate and keep copies of your VMs out on this DR as a service instance. And then if you have a DR event in your on-premise data center, you then can spin up in the DR as a service instance and run them until you get your on-premise data center up and running again, and then resync them back. So that's what the vSphere Replication Appliance is for. Now, with the new vSphere Replication Appliance, it does give you the capability of automating using vCenter Orchestrator or vRealize Orchestrator to automate the process of failover and failback. For the most part, this was something that was completely manual in the previous version of vSphere Replication Appliance. And we've made some other improvements, such as we've done a better job with compressing and the workload behind that. So now when you're replicating any changes or that initial sync of that VM, they're going to happen much quicker, and it's not going to type as much as your bandwidth in your internet pipe as it would before. So again, just some really good improvements to vSphere Replication, be able to sync up and replicate initially that VM out onto the DR as a service much quicker, faster, again, taking up less bandwidth in your connection. We still have the same vSphere clients. We have the vSphere web client as well as the C# client that typically you might be familiar with, as you see on the right there. That would be installed on a Windows box. Now, we have made tremendous improvements on the vSphere web client. The web client, as you see, we have improved login time. It's all a lot of performance-based improvements. So when you click on something, whether it be a right click or click into anything, the response in which it gives you back what you're looking for is much quicker. So vSphere Web Client is performing up to 16 times faster than it did before, depending on what you're doing. You also see that some of the menus have been dropped down to the bottom and the sides to where you can hide those, making it a little bit easier to see the full interface without the tasks or any of those running tasks or anything that are in the way. So again, predominantly the web client, although there's been a lot of improvements, they are basically performance. So your vSphere admins are going to be much happier with working in that web client, which is the primary interface that they're going to be using to manage a VMware environment. So they'll be very happy with these changes. The vSphere C# client is still available, but it is very limited in its use. It is meant to be able to manage a single host so that if your vCenter's down, you can go ahead and connect to a single vSphere host and manage it from that particular C# client. You're also still, when you're using Update Manager, you're still going to be using that from the C# client rather than the web client. Eventually that will carry over into the web client down the road, I'm sure, because everything new that's coming out is now, again, going into the web client and only available through there because that is going to be the main interface to do all administration. and also some particular hardware versions of VMs you'll need to go ahead and manage through this C# client. So again, those are both the same as they were before, just some improvements done to them, but more so, again, performance on the web client side. And of course, with any addition, increase of vSphere and vCenter, our maximums are always increasing all the time with any of our products, as you see here, going from the 5.5 to the 6. For the most part, we've at least doubled most of our maximums. There are a few that we've done more than double, such as your virtual RAM per VM, and then there's only one that we didn't at a minimum at least double, which was, of course, your CPUs per host. So this just gives you some of your maximums here for vSphere 6. And finally, we've made some miscellaneous enhancements to the Microsoft Clustering Service compatibility. As you see, we now are supporting Windows Server 2012 R2 and SQL 2012 for always-on available groups as well. We've included IP version 6 support for it, as well as being able to vMotion between your physical hosts if they're using RDM type connections to your data sources. So those are just some of the advancements that we've made. So that completes this session on vSphere 6 and vCenter 6 as far as all the new and updated features of it. I hope this was helpful in kind of getting you up to speed, at least on the basics of the new features and advancements. And if you have any questions, of course, feel free to reach out to us at Tech Data, either your sales or technical representatives such as myself, and we'll be happy to help you within your vSphere 6 related questions.